What happens when you simply walk away? Not out of anger, not as punishment, but quietly, because you've chosen yourself. This isn't about disappearing from the world. It's about disconnecting from invisible expectations, unspoken roles, and emotional weight that was never truly yours. When you step back, something shifts. People feel the void, not just as absence, but as exposure. Because you weren't just present in their lives. You were a mirror, a crutch, a projection. Carl Jung wrote that what we reject in ourselves doesn't vanish. It waits. And when you're no longer there, what they've avoided seeing finally rises. They don't miss you. They miss who they could pretend to be in your presence. Your departure isn't just distance, it's disruption. A mirror broken. And with it, the illusion that they were ever in control. And that's where the unraveling begins. Not of your story, but of the false image they once built around you. Part 1. You were never just you. They never saw you for who you really were. They saw a version of you, crafted by need, colored by insecurity, shaped by their own unresolved fears. This isn't always malicious. It's human, but it's dangerous because over time, you stop being a person and start becoming a projection. Carl Jung called this projection, the unconscious act of attributing our inner world onto someone else. We see in others what we can't or won't see in ourselves. Our wounds, our longings, our guilt, all quietly projected outward. You were the mirror. They projected what they couldn't hold alone. The need to be loved, the fear of abandonment, the desire to feel important. And you, whether knowingly or not, carried it. But here's the twist. While they projected, you performed. This is where Jung's idea of the persona comes in, the mask we wear to meet the world's expectations. It's the role you play to be accepted, valued, needed. You become the caretaker, the hero, the fixer, the one who never leaves. And slowly, you forget that it's a mask. Because when enough people reflect back the version they want you to be, you start believing it. This is how relationships become theater, built not on truth, but on assigned scripts. You're not loved for your reality, but for the utility of your presence. Your worth is measured not by your truth, but by how well you fit the role they assigned. That's why stepping away becomes so disruptive. When you walk away, you don't just remove yourself. You break a story. You interrupt a narrative that gave someone else identity, stability, and the illusion of control. You were never just you. You were a symbol, a screen, a structure holding up someone else's emotional architecture. And when that structure disappears, when your mirror shatters and the persona they built themselves around begins to fracture, what happens next isn't grief, it's confusion. Because they were never really connecting with you. They were connecting with the version of them they believed existed through you. And so now, the mask has no counterpart. The mirror is gone. Now, with the mirror gone, they must face what's been waiting in the dark all along, themselves. Part 2. The void isn't about you, it's about them. When you step away, what remains is not your absence. It's their emptiness. The discomfort they feel isn't truly about missing you. It's about losing the emotional scaffolding you unknowingly held in place. And suddenly, they don't know who they are without you. This is the secret no one says out loud. Many people build their identities around others. Not out of love, but out of avoidance. Avoidance of their own emptiness. Avoidance of their own unresolved pain. So when you step away, it doesn't just feel like someone left. It feels like something collapsed. Carl Jung called this confrontation the emergence of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we suppress, reject, or disown. Our anger, our jealousy, our fear of being unwanted. All of it buried deep, hidden beneath distraction, routine, and the illusion of control. But when the person they leaned on disappears, when the noise quiets and the mirror cracks, those shadows start to rise. Uninvited, uncomfortable, unavoidable. Your departure becomes a trigger. Not of sadness, but of reckoning. Because now, there's no one left to carry the emotional weight for them. No one left to absorb their projections. They're alone, not just with silence, but with the parts of themselves they've tried to forget. It's the ache of meeting yourself, unfiltered and unsupported, for the very first time. The void forces a question: who am I without them? And for some, there's no clear answer. Because they never built that sense of self in the first place. You were their definition, their anchor. And now, they're drifting in waters they never learned to navigate. This is more than heartbreak. It's an identity crisis. Because when a person becomes a mirror, and that mirror breaks, the reflection shatters with it. They're not grieving you. They're grieving the version of themselves that only existed when you were near. And as the shadow rises, as the self begins to unravel, something else begins to stir beneath the surface. Panic. Because now, they must confront the question they were never ready to ask. Was I ever whole on my own? And when the shadow rises, they don't face it. They run. Loud. Desperate. Part 3. When they lose their mirror. People don't always process your absence rationally. They feel it emotionally, and often chaotically. It usually begins with denial. They just need space. They'll come back. They convince themselves nothing has changed, even as the silence grows louder. Then comes anger. Not always explosive, but sharp. Suddenly, you're selfish. You're cold. You've abandoned them. They lash out, not because they hate you, but because they don't know how to live without the version of themselves they saw through you. If the anger doesn't hold, they shift into one of two extremes. They either idealize you, turn you into a saint, someone who was too good for this world, or they demonize you, rewrite you as the villain, the betrayer, the one who never really cared. Why? Because the human ego cannot sit comfortably in confusion. It needs a narrative, something to explain the pain, something that makes the discomfort make sense. This is where Jung's concept of ego defense mechanisms becomes crucial. When reality becomes too painful, the psyche defends itself. It rewrites memory. It reframes events. It reshapes you. You become a new character in their mental movie, not the truth of you, but the story their ego needs to survive the fracture. For some, you're the savior they didn't appreciate in time. For others, the abandoner who was never fully invested. Sometimes you're just a ghost, an undefined presence, too painful to name. Other times, you become a myth, someone so idealized that the truth of who you were fades completely. But none of these versions are you. They are coping strategies, emotional survival tactics, stories created not to honor your truth, but to protect theirs. And if you ever hear what they're saying about you from a distance, you might not even recognize yourself, because it was never really about who you were. It was always about what you meant to them. Now, in your absence, they scramble to rebuild meaning, even if it means distorting your truth to protect theirs. It's not cruelty, it's coping. It's what we do when we can't face the full weight of loss. And beneath the fables, something essential is unraveling. Something that once relied on you as a center of gravity. Part 4. A system without its anchor. Some people don't just connect with you, they stabilize themselves through you. Your presence becomes more than comfort. It becomes structure. A quiet center of gravity in their emotional system. They may not express it. They may not even be fully conscious of it. But you become the emotional reference point they orbit around. And when that center disappears, the entire internal system begins to wobble. Take her, for example. She was never overly expressive, never demanding. But every time she felt unworthy, unseen, unsure, she reached out. Not dramatically. Sometimes just a smile, a message, a presence. You were the unspoken reassurance, the invisible evidence that she mattered. She didn't realize it at first. But over time, your presence became intertwined with her sense of self-worth. And when you stepped away, she wasn't just losing you. She was losing the mirror that reminded her she existed, that she mattered. This is where things begin to unravel, not dramatically, but subtly. In confusion, in self-questioning, in that deep, hollow ache that whispers, "Who am I, if they're not here to reflect me back to myself?" Carl Jung once wrote that when the ego's structure is too dependent on the external, its collapse is inevitable the moment that external support is taken away. Your absence isn't just distance, it's a disruption, a destabilizing force that strikes directly at the unconscious identity they built around you. Because your presence, your consistency, your emotional availability became the scaffolding around which they organized their insecurities. And without it, there's nothing left to lean on. This isn't about blame. You didn't ask to be their emotional anchor. Most of us don't realize when we've taken on that role. We're just showing up, being ourselves, being kind. But for someone else, especially someone silently struggling, that kindness becomes a crutch, a lifeline, a borrowed sense of self. And so, when that lifeline is cut, what remains is free fall. But within that collapse is something strangely powerful, a forced encounter with the self. This is what Jung called the beginning of individuation, the painful, necessary path of becoming whole from within. Not through someone else, not through reflection, but through direct confrontation with who we are when there's no one left to stabilize us. It's not gentle, it's not easy, but it's real. When you walk away, you unknowingly activate that process in others. You shatter a pattern, you break a dependency. You remove the mask of mutual comfort and reveal the raw structure beneath. And sometimes that act feels cruel, because people confuse the removal of comfort with the removal of care. But the truth is, your departure isn't necessarily an act of punishment. It's a breaking open. Yes, it leaves a mess. Yes, it stirs pain. But it also leaves space. Space for reconstruction. Space for growth. Space for them to become, not who they were with you, but who they were always meant to be without you. You were never their comfort. You were always their catalyst. The void doesn't define you, it frees you. If this message stirred something inside you, good. That means you're ready. Because walking away isn't weakness, it's clarity. It's the moment you stop being a character in someone else's story and start reclaiming authorship of your own. People will misunderstand. They'll project. They'll rewrite your exit as betrayal. Let them. Their discomfort is not your burden to carry. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, It will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And sometimes, the only way to make the unconscious conscious is to remove yourself from the equation, to walk away and let the silence speak. Because that silence isn't emptiness, it's a mirror. And in that mirror, they're forced to see what they were never ready to face. So now, I ask you to affirm your truth. Comment below. The void doesn't define me, it frees me. Say it boldly. Say it for the version of you that stayed too long. Say it for the part of you that knows. Freedom begins the moment you stop explaining your absence. You didn't leave them behind. You reclaimed what was never theirs to own, yourself.